Hey, so it's Saturday afternoon and I'm back with another live video. This one is about grooming and how it can happen to grown-ups too. So actually, fresh content. This story happened to a friend of mine, and that is not a cliche. Actually happened to a person I know. And she called me, messaged me. She's like, what on earth just happened to me? And so we worked through it. She's a survivor. She's also a single professional woman, multiple degrees, highly educated, actively involved in advocacy. So my point in sharing all that is because it happens to people who are well educated too, even people who are well educated about abuse and grooming and predatory behavior sets and so on and so forth. So I wanted to give you this story anonymously, no names, no identifying details, but I want to tell you a story about an adult on adult grooming conversation, grooming between grown-ups from a predatory person. So here goes, okay? And like I said, so this is a woman who is professional, educated, and an anti-abuse advocate. Happens to be a friend of mine. I have her permission to share this story. And this is from a conversation she had with someone who says he's a pastor. So fancy that. He is a seminary graduate and is applying for positions in ministry, calls himself a pastor, so on and so forth. They're fairly acquainted. They've met each other before. They are running in the same circles. They have some trusted mutual friends. She knew that he was talking to, kind of dating somebody else in the past, and isn't sure where this is going. When she gets home from like a long trip, she's super exhausted, been traveling, and he starts chatting her up on social media. So it starts with chit chat, right? And every grooming conversation, every grooming relationship starts with something low key and non-threatening. He has recently applied for a job. They're talking about it. It's really low key. It's super laid back. She mentions that she's super tired. He's visiting town, happens to be in the small town where she's at. She says, oh, where are you staying? And he's like, with you, of course. And she's like, well, wait, what? And he backs off. So that's the first time this person tests her interest in this grooming pattern. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to tell you the story, and as we go through the story, I'm going to stop and I'm going to point out each thing that has some level of predatory behavior or grooming. So, and by the way, if you're here and you're watching with me, please totally like, follow, share it, and leave me a comment. That would be super awesome. Give me your feedback. And if anything like this has ever happened to you, I want to know. So drop a comment. So first, his first introduction that is a hint that this conversation might not just be casual friend interest or something, even a genuine dating interest. So, someone's just asking me, can someone explain the gist of grooming? Great question, TJ. So I'm going to stop the story for just one quick second. Nobody yell at me for rambling, okay? That's all everybody's favorite thing. I know, it's long. I'm giving you details because this kind of stuff doesn't do summaries very well. So, TJ asks, can someone explain the gist of grooming? Grooming is a pattern of behavior, and this is my definition. This is probably not the dictionary definition, but grooming is a pattern of behavior intended to remove someone's boundaries, to lessen their defenses in order to be able to get them to do something for the other person's gratification that would make them otherwise uncomfortable, or that might be actually outright wrong. So, someone who is grooming a young person into a situation where they are going to be trafficked ultimately would start by pretending to be their friend, getting their information, maybe getting them to do something that they're slightly uncomfortable with and wouldn't want their friends to know, and then using that information, leveraging that information to get them to do something that they are far more uncomfortable with in order to put them under the power of the person who's doing the grooming. So grooming is about power, grooming is about control, grooming is very often about sexual exploitation, and it is about tricky people. I mean, a person who is being sneaky or tricky, pulling someone into a pattern of behavior that if they just presented it to them, the answer would be no, I am not okay with that. That goes against my values, etc. And it almost always has an element of power, control, and exploitation. So back to this, I'm going to break this down and give you the story and tell you how this person, this adult person who claims to be a pastor, was grooming a professional woman in a flirtatious conversation. This is one of the ways that it can look like. And in this particular story, it happens to be a man doing it to a woman. That does not mean that a woman can't do it to a man. I am just using the story as it is. So this guy, like I said, this guy is chit-chatting with her, talking about how he's applied for a ministry position as a pastor, and then she asked him where he's staying in town, and he says, well, with you, of course. Now, she's a single woman, and it's worth it to pause here and say that in the particular faith community that this is happening in, the expectation is for celibacy, purity, non-engagement in sexual activity outside of marriage. So I recognize I have all kinds of viewers, and for some people that's just like unfathomable and way off base, but this is the context in which this is happening. A committed, people who purport to be looking for committed dating relationships. So she says, what? When he says he's staying with her, and he backs off. That was his little testing the waters. So that's his soft intro, testing the waters. And he says, joking. And she's like, oh, okay. And then he tests again a little bit later in the conversation. He's like, so you crashed out on your couch? You sleeping on your couch? And she's like, no, I'm working late. Some of my best creativity comes at night. And then she deflects. And then the conversation goes on a little bit. And then he tests again. He's like, so you ever get into mischief when you're up late at night? And she's unsure at this point. Remember, she's exhausted. She's been traveling. She's at home. She's working late. It's late at night. And yes, you can be looking at this in the middle of the daytime and going, that is not a wise conversation to get into. But sometimes none of us think clearly when we're exhausted and tired and late and someone's paying us attention and we don't realize what we're getting ourselves into. So she answers, well, that's kind of a loaded question. The conversation moves on. He says, well, you looking for some mischief? And she's like, I'm not even sure how to interpret that. And he's like, well, nothing good happens at night. So she's asking, like, hey, does this guy mean it? I mean, and again, he says he's a pastor, right? She knows he's been dating somebody. And also, English is not this woman's first language. So she's a little hesitant. Like, have I understood this guy correctly? No woman who is single and dateable wants to be known as like a really ornery person who's undateable. You don't want to get a reputation for being rude and harsh and unapproachable. So she's like trying to, deflect it, roll with it, and just see, where is this guy going with this? She has no idea where he's actually headed. And so he says, nothing good happens at night. And she's thinking, how do I deflect? And she's like, okay, you're funny, I guess. And then he apologizes. And he's like, I'm sorry, I'll behave. And so she tries to change the topic. And at this point, she says, that position sounds great. Meaning the job position, the ministry position, the pastoral position he just said he's been applying and interviewing for. And he's like, position? And she says, job. Yours. And he's like, oh, my mind went way elsewhere. But he had just said sorry. So she's thinking, well, wait a second. What did I even say? What did I do? And she's like, hey, you know what? I'm not looking for mischief. You want to do something clean? Like, let's get a smoothie or something. But there's a small town. Nothing is open late at night. And maybe, like another time. And then he responds, get this. Like, she's trying to redirect it. Get this. He responds, clean mischief is boring. So he says, he's like clearly now asking for more. She replies, who are you? Aren't you a pastor? And then he says, I should get off. And now she's curious because she's wondering, what is this guy after? And he says, so she asks him, weren't you talking to someone? Weren't you dating someone? Should I tell her that you're looking for mischief while you're traveling and away out of town? And he says, no, not anymore. We're working through some stuff. And she's like, okay, English is not my first language. what does working through some stuff mean? What does exactly that mean? And so he realizes and responds in a totally non-committed kind of way. He says, well, it means we're not doing it right now. We're not doing anything right now. But I might get back with her later. We're just working through some stuff. But he's still looking for mischief. And this other poor girl has no idea that while they're working through stuff, he's out clearly, overtly looking to get busy with other women while applying for ministry positions as a pastor. So then later she deflects, changes the conversation. She's tired. She's ready to get off. And then he asks her, so what special powers have you got? Can I experience your special powers? And she's like, oh my goodness, that is not what we're talking about here. And he says, fine, I'm going to go to sleep. She says, look, and this is where she gets explicit in her rejection, which is great. She says, I have no special powers. So she's like laying it down. And he's like, this is where he comes back and says, now it says I have a low network connection. I'm not sure what's going on here. Can you guys hear me? If you can hear me and you can see me, drop me a comment right now or a like, hit like. But I'm not sure what's going on. So anyway, so I'll just keep recording. He explicitly at this point, sorry guys, I know the broadcast keeps freezing. I apologize. I don't know what's going on. So he explicitly says, I mean, fooling around. And then he asks her how old she is. She answers, but says, because she works in the health industry, says, but you know, in health years I'm younger. And he's like, well, I should refrain from sexual responses. And she says, are you asking me permission to be inappropriate? And he says, yes. Can I come check out your body? And she's like, I am speechless. Oh my goodness. I have seen a lot of crazy, but I very rarely get speechless. And he starts making excuses. And he's like, oh, so he's just made a very bold ask, even though she's deflected, changed the subject, moved on, and said no in polite ways every single time. And so here he says, well, this lady, the only option is for mischief. And this is where she gets even more explicit. She says, because I trust our mutual friends, I am giving you the benefit of the doubt. And then he plays the guilt card. So I don't get to come check out your body tonight. And she says, look, I am interested in an honorable man who wants something real and honest. And then he backs off and he's like, whoa, I'm sorry if I offended you. And she says, what exactly are you looking for? And he says, oh, just fun, but you weren't interested in that. And she's like, so basically this entire conversation, you, a pastor, this entire conversation was about a booty call? And he's like, well, yikes, when you put it that way. So at this point, she starts, because, look, she's a survivor. She's been conditioned to try to explain herself. Yes, women ought to be able to just say, no, not interested. But there can be negative repercussions when you do that, especially if this is someone who runs in your friendship circle. And so there's always this obligation, this sense of obligation to be really kind and gentle and easy and polite in your letdown when someone is being overtly inappropriate. So she gives reasons. She's probably explaining too much, but whatever. She gives reasons. She's like, no, I would never do this. Besides my own values, I work in a faith community and I would just never do this. And number two, dude, you're a pastor. What are you thinking? So then he tells her something interesting. At this point, he has followed a predatory pattern of a soft introduction, testing her boundaries, trying to make it a joke, backing off and apologizing, and then following it up immediately with a stronger ask. Then trying to blame her for being kind of too uninterested and mean, causing her guilt, talking about how he's actually really good at things. He's really spiritual because he's applying for pastoral ministry jobs, and then coming in with a bold sexual ask, then making excuses as though she should have known the whole time, guilting her again, then apologizing to try to smooth it over so she doesn't get mad at him, and then minimizing it was just fun and you weren't interested. So when she lays out her responses, then he tells her, because she's like, look, you're a pastor and I work in a faith community. This is a no-go. I mean, it's a no anyway, but like that is something that would just be a horrific kind of thing if two people did that and it got out. And he's like, well, just don't tell anyone. The secrecy is a turn on. Well, you know what that means? That means someone who is turned on by keeping something secret that they know could ruin both people. That's a power trip. That is the potential for blackmail. You get somebody drawn into something, they do some small thing that they were uncomfortable with, and then you have power over them. And he openly admitted in the conversation that he found the confidentiality factor a turn on. That is a power play. So she replies, I have been in an abusive, objectifying marriage before, and right now I am rewiring my own brain so that I never get into something like that again. And you know how he responds? So, you want to cuddle? No. Just no. His response is to blow right through the boundaries of everything she just told him, as though he has some kind of right to ask for something more. And granted, this is not a person she's dating. This is not a person she's ever been on a date with. So here are some breakdowns of things. Very often, and other women, if you are watching this and you've ever been in some similar kind of situation on any level, tell me if this is the same kind of thing that you've gone through. So women often freeze in the middle of that kind of situation because they aren't sure that's actually where the conversation is going. And they're just like, whoa, wait, what? And because women second guess ourselves very easily, even very strong women, very educated women, very powerful women will second guess themselves, and they will wonder if they're actually reading the situation right. The full import of the grooming behavior, of the things that were asked of them, often doesn't hit them until they process it all later. And so because we want to assume the best about people, including men, because we are afraid to be called rude or mean, because we don't want to make someone angry, it is very easy to freeze up in the moment and not say all those clear-cut things that people just say. You should just speak your mind. It's not that easy. And so, I mean, hey, what if the guy didn't mean any of that at all, and you spoke your mind and he was actually not implying any of that, and then you look like a terrible person because you just assumed all of this terrible stuff. And so, yes, I see someone leaving a comment, TJ, so survivors, well, not just survivors, but also survivors, women in general, and I would say survivors among men too, often feel the need to either explain themselves each time, as opposed to saying no, goodbye, or doing a clean cutoff, especially in small, tight-knit communities where if you are doing a clean cutoff, you're probably going to have to run into that person or that person's friends again in the future and work with them on a close or distant level. And so you feel honor bound to be very delicate in how you handle the situation. You don't really realize that someone's been playing head games with you until it's way too late. And that this might be different if you're married and someone's coming on to you married, and then you can just say, sorry, dude, I'm married. This is a no-go. But when you're single, you don't necessarily want to get that terrible relationship. So you may stay in a conversation, one, because you haven't fully realized where a person is heading with this, two, because you feel frozen in the middle of it, you're not sure how to respond, and three, because you don't want to get a reputation of being someone who's inaccessible and unapproachable and cold and rude and so on and so forth. So if you found yourself in this kind of situation, and hey, men, if you have ever felt predatory behavior kind of like this from women, I would love to hear that too. I'm speaking from a woman's point of view. I'm telling the story of a female friend, so I am definitely talking about women experiencing this from men. But guys, If you felt this in today's climate of very forward or dominant women in a different kind of environment than what I'm talking about, tell me how it feels. So how to extricate yourself. 3 basic things, because I don't want to leave this video without giving you tools to get out of it. First of all, you may not realize it right away, but if you do, as soon as you realize it, push back on the red flags sooner than later. Sooner than later. If you realize that someone is definitely moving toward inappropriate conversation that is crossing your values, crossing your boundaries, and I'm speaking to a faith-based context here, don't wait so long to push back on that. And this is something that is equally appropriate for both men and women. So I'm not just speaking to the girls here, but ladies and gentlemen, make a choice to never joke about inappropriate stuff in a bantering, flirtatious conversation. I'm not saying don't banter and don't flirt if that's an appropriate thing and you're getting to know somebody, but never do it about inappropriate sexual stuff. Draw a line. Don't cross that line. And if someone else tries to make you cross that line, don't laugh, don't banter back, don't go there, and just give yourself permission permanently that if someone is crossing boundaries in joking conversation with you and trying to get you to laugh at it, that you just say, sorry, I don't think that's funny. That doesn't jive with how I roll. That is not how I set my boundaries. So that's number 1. Draw that line, decide where that's going to be for you, and don't cross it. Not joking with friends, not joking with potential dates, not in flirtatious conversations, not when you're getting to know somebody. Just set that boundary. And then once that's set for you, it makes it so much easier. When someone starts pushing those boundaries, you can just chop that off at the knees earlier in the conversation instead of mentally and emotionally feeling obligated to follow through. Number 2, give yourself some practice phrases. If you are single, if you're in the dating zone, and hey, I mean, if you're married, you can just always default to, I'm married, I don't do that. But if you're single, then it's just a whole different thing to navigate. So if you're single, give yourself some basic phrases. Those might be like, I'm sorry, you are asking the wrong thing from the wrong girl or guy, which is fine too. Something like, it sounds to me like you are looking for something that is totally inconsistent with how I live my life. Thank you for the information, or thank you for the offer, but no thank you, that's not how I act. That is inconsistent with my values. Here's another option. I get that you're joking around, but your intentions that underneath this joking are making me uncomfortable, and minimizing it by making it a joke doesn't help out. So I just don't think that that is compatible with how I choose to have my relationships. I loved the person that I was telling you in the story. I loved her response with, hey, I'm looking for something real, and that's not this. So thank you, but no thank you, because I'm willing to hold out for something real. And number 3, once you realize that someone is willing to push your values and cross your boundaries, don't go back there. Do not try to give that person the benefit of the doubt, and do not try to invite more contact. Don't think that you are obligated to continue. Be too busy. Send it to voicemail, block the number, etc., etc., and just set that boundary. You are not going, and I'm not talking about having encouraging relationships with people, friendships with people who may not understand your values, or being rude to people in the workplace. Guys, so just don't take this off on tangents here. I'm talking about being single and in the dating world. Someone hits on you and they're doing it in an inappropriate way. Don't give them a second chance, okay? If you're looking for something real, something honest, something true, something committed, something intimate, something of value, something spiritually wholesome, don't play around with people who cross your boundaries. Once you state your boundaries, if that does not get their attention, if they are continuing to laugh and joke around in a way that makes you uncomfortable and that does not respect your values, do not feel obligated to continue that conversation. So that's my story for today. And I would love to hear if you have ever had something similar like that, if you have ever experienced that kind of predatory grooming behavior where someone starts with something and then tests your boundaries and then guilts you into, or tries to guilt you into, more than activity or something that you are not comfortable with. You know, and then if somebody tries to use that against you, and somebody tries to kind of trick you into that and then acts like keeping it secret. You know, we tell kids, don't keep secrets. If someone tells you to keep a secret, you go tell, and you tell until someone believes you. That's a great principle as an adult too. If someone in a relationship context is trying to tell you to do something you know is wrong, it crosses your boundaries, and you are told they're trying to get you to keep it a secret, that's something that that person can blackmail you with. That's something that person gives that person power over you, and that is not going to be a healthy relationship from the get-go. It's going to be started on a toxic foundation. So, yeah, wrapping that up. Have a great Saturday. If you liked this, please like it, share it, drop me a comment, tell me your experiences, ask your questions. Oh, and by the way, I'm getting ready to launch an entirely new YouTube channel with all of these videos together in one platform. So I will do a new live video about that when it is ready to go over the next couple of days. And I can't wait to get to communicate with you guys over there. And thank you very much for watching today.